This is a brief mini lesson on being a good peer reviewer. In it, I will outline my theory and my pedagogical reasons for both assigning peer review and the purposes that I hope it accomplishes for us as writers in my class. So, I think we've all encountered peer review that is not helpful. The possible feedback extremes that either go something like this: it's great, don't change a thing. Wow, amazing, good job. Which, though affirming, doesn't always help you with actual revisions. And then there's the cranky option where it's just completely full of marks that are all very nitpicky and or just negative, not helpful. Basically, the reader telling you it sucks. Cool. That can be overwhelming and just as unhelpful. Now, if those extremes are so prevalent, why do teachers insist on assigning peer review? Well, we value peer review as writers for many, many reasons. First of all, it gives us as writers a chance to test out our writing on a real life audience, or as I like to say, a brain or brains that are not my own brain. Because things might sound amazing to me, but then somebody else might read them and not know at all what I'm talking about. We get to learn something in terms of how our writing might be improved. So we get constructive, useful feedback, which should drive revision. And here's something really interesting. Peer review helps us verbalize ideas, which is useful both for writers, which of course helps us to clarify our meaning or see if our ideas are being understood. But reading peer review is almost more effective than being the writer receiving the peer review. So what I mean by that, I said reading peer review. Reading somebody else's work in order to peer review can be more useful to the reader because you're getting ideas that are articulated that maybe you didn't think of, but it's giving you ideas, or you can see how somebody is structuring sentences, and you can take that information, and you're not going to copy their sentence, but you might be inspired to try sentences in that configuration, or you might not have thought about ways to organize your paper in the same way. And additionally, reading and commenting on somebody else's writing requires a level of critical thinking that is above and beyond what is required to simply compose a draft. And writers who give peer review feedback often do more revisions than writers who simply receive and don't give any feedback. Does that make sense? It's so valuable. It can change the way you write to just give peer review feedback, let alone to receive it. So here are some things you can do as a peer reviewer in my class. And these are things that I'm expecting from every student who is in one of my writing classes. First and foremost, we're going to take a rhetorical stance and consider our friend's goals. Consider the writer's goals. What are they trying to accomplish in this piece? Now, that might be as simple as asking them or shooting them a quick email to clarify what they want you to look at. You might see posted in a discussion thread what the writer hopes to have help with, and that's where you want to focus your attention. You don't want to disregard what the writer is looking for in terms of support in a piece of writing. And then you want to read generously, supportively, with specific suggestions. It does not help to have something underlined with no verbiage that explains why it's underlined, why it might be good or bad. If you're uncertain about a grammatical issue, just mark it with a question. You don't want to ignore it because it might be something that needs attention. But don't feel like you need to correct it, because oftentimes I hear students who say, I don't trust my classmates because they've gotten too many incorrect corrections in the past. That's the opposite of what we want here. We want to trust each other. We want to be helping each other make our writing better as a group, as a collective. So if something doesn't sound right in your brain as you're reading it, but you don't know why, just put that in the margins. This doesn't sound right. I'm not sure why this sentence took me 3 times to read, but it did. Maybe you can look at it. I'm not sure this comma should be here, ? Right? Don't necessarily just correct it willy-nilly and then have it be wrong, and then your friend doesn't trust you anymore. Read through the entire piece. You just basically want to give respect and read through from start to finish. And then here is something that's going to be very important as we move through peer review in this class, is that we consider the levels of concern or the orders of concern. And I call these the hocks, mocks, and locks. You have higher order concerns, hocks. These are big picture things, whole paper issues like the purpose, the rhetorical situation, if the audience is appropriately being addressed, the rhetor's ethos, is it credible? Why or why not? Genre conventions and strategies. So is this a genre that needs really tight organization or that could be more creative? Are you making the claim? Is that message really clear? Then you can move on to middle order concerns. So these I think about as paragraph level concerns, like within a paragraph and between paragraphs. Within a paragraph, are there appropriate evidence examples? Is there appropriate organization and flow between paragraphs? So that means transitions, but it also means, are the paragraphs tightly constructed to be a single elaborated idea and then move on to a new paragraph for the next idea, even if those ideas are connected. This also could mean things like voice and style in terms of how sentences are constructed or how writers are introducing sources and leading out of quotes. And then you have lower order concerns. So this is the last step. These are the things of least importance in terms of priority for revision. You could change all the lower order concerns, but if you still don't have a good organization, you're going to end up losing some of those changes anyway when you redo your organization. So this is like sentence structure, punctuation, things that are considered quote unquote grammar. This could also be citations or spelling. But these levels of concern are things that I want us all to be addressing in each other's writing every time we do peer review. So we're going to address higher order concerns, middle order concerns, and lower order concerns. And then sometimes if we want to give comments on somebody's reading or piece that we're reading, it can be tricky to come up with phrases that are respectful yet generative. So here's some suggestions. I always love probative questions. And in fact, that's part of our peer review assignment, is that I'm always going to assign you to address hocks, mocks, and locks, those orders of concern. And I'm always going to assign you to pose one question, because questions are so empowering for a writer. As a writer, you get to choose how you answer a question, as opposed to what do you do if a word is crossed out? You can either ignore it or not. But with a question, you have to put a little thought into why you might make a particular move. I love questions that are phrased, what would happen if? Because it really opens up a sense of possibility for the writer. Or can you explain more? Can you clarify this? I was a little confused. Could you support this with more evidence? Can you fill in the blank, make a move? You can also respond from a reader's voice, or like from the character of the reader. What I thought about while I was reading, or when I was reading, I had this reaction, or when I was reading, I tripped up on this. That's a valid response, even though maybe none of us are English teachers except for me. We are all readers. And so you say, as a reader, I blank. As a reader, I was confused. As a reader, I really like this. And then you can say, what I liked most was blank. That's obvious, maybe, but then add that because. What's the reason? Or suggestions to develop things more. You could develop your argument more if you brought in some different sources. Or a helpful suggestion might be to go through and make sure all of your commas are correct. Just remember what's not helpful, right? A blanket statement in either direction isn't helpful. We need specific generative feedback for each other. And mostly, let's have fun as we read and give valuable peer review feedback to each other.